Email from Joe. Just Joe. About the third console phenomenon. He says, what's your take on the apparent third console curse? For whatever reason, in the States at least, it seems that any company that has made it far enough to release a third console ran into some circumstances with said console that made it disappoint compared to their console before it, which in many cases was their best performing console in terms of sales, market share, etc. Some of the examples that come to mind are the Sega Saturn, the Nintendo 64, PlayStation 3, Xbox One. Most of these consoles were or are quite good despite their difficulties, and in some cases even managed to turn things around after an initial rough first few years. But the fact that this has happened so frequently has me fascinated.
They get one generation to ramp up. The second generation, they nail it.
Yep.
And then the third one's
where the hubris takes over.
The third one is someone else going through a different step in that process.
Yeah.
Chasing after them with their second console.
Yeah.
Also, the only one in that list that actually was anything remotely resembling a failure was the Saturn, and even that was around
like sales-wise,
yeah. The 64 isn't as good as Super Nintendo, but a lot of people.
But you can point to like fatal flaws in each one of these things that held it back,
like market,
dramatically.
Missteps in the market that led to it, like losing to
like 64 losing to PlayStation, Xbox losing to
like you
PS4.
can literally look at the N64 and say carts over CDs. You fucked up.
Like they made huge mistakes or they misread the market.
Huge mistake.
That's fair. Yeah. But yeah, definitely not failures, I would say. No. Except for maybe Saturn, but even that.
But he's saying he's framing it in relative terms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like the N64 is not as good as the Super Nintendo.
No, and PS3 is not as good as PS2. Yeah, he's right about that.
That's a hard comparison.
Yeah, but it's not.
No.
Okay.
No, it's definitely not.
I want to make sure we're being reasonable here.
There's one is at one end of the spectrum, the other is closer to the other end than the middle.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sure.
It's not a fucking Virtual Boy, but if you start stretching these lines out to infinity, it's closer to Virtual Boy than it is to Super Nintendo.
Every one of these cases, though, you can look at the console and say they misread blank. They misread something about the way games were going.
Yeah,
and it cost them.
With the Saturn, it was the viability of 2D and 3D.
Yeah, they made a 2D machine when 3D was clearly the future.
With the N64, it was carts.
Right.
With the Xbox One, it was the online infrastructure and always-on stuff that they had to try to pivot away from.
And also all the media stuff they tried to cram in and the sacrifices they made around that stuff. PS3 was more just like the wake-up call for the industry that like, hey, people don't want to spend $600 on a console.
Yeah.
For the most part.
And Xbox was just so much better with online stuff and achievements. Totally, and the bells and whistles were so much better on 360 than PS3 at first.
I think their misread there was the value of the PlayStation brand to overcome whatever bullshit they wanted to shove down the pipe.
And there were also the design flaws with the console itself that made it harder to make games for. It was just a bad confluence of events for them.
Yeah, plenty of decent games on the PS3.
Totally. Like it obviously proved its worth.
And it was right there with the Xbox 360, especially by the end.
Right. But if you had to look at those consoles and say which one of these was more influential, like there's no question.
Yeah.
Like zero question.
Yeah, he's got a point.